All right, we are live on Facebook. I love it when technology works. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I am joined with part of the team from BLOKWORX, and you are in for a treat today. We are talking with Rob Bowles. He is the president, founder of BLOKWORX, also known as the chief cook and bottle washer. And so we are going to be talking about all kinds of things related to BLOKWORX and security and the MSP world right now. I am also joined by a familiar face to many, Emily Sagano. She is officially the Director of Marketing and Strategy at BLOKWORX, also known as the rock star of all things related to strategy and marketing and sales. We love Emily. We are both huge fans of hers, and you guys are in for a real treat. So we almost went over in the green room because we were talking about cybersecurity and sales and the world that we all live in. And we love the people that are watching. We love you guys. And so we are here to add a tremendous amount of value to your life today. And so we're going to jump in. We're going to talk about BLOKWORX, what makes you tick, what makes you different, and pepper us with questions. For those of you that are joining live, jump in the comments and let us know you're here and ask us questions. Let's just kind of like stump the expert, and we'll put Rob and Emily and myself on the spot, see what we can do to help you out. So let's jump in. Let's start with a number of years ago, Rob. Let's talk about your MSP days. Tell us about running your MSP, any challenges that you had, and then how you transitioned from that into the cybersecurity world.
Wow, memories. All right. BLOKWORX MSP days. Interesting. You know, if I look back, my background was I was an SE at a big telco, which was anything for me to do with telecommunications in the traditional sense. But I was on a specialized team that all we did was manage security, complex wide area networks, and data centers. And so when I left that entity and created BLOKWORX, we started doing the same thing, right? It was complex WAN, managed security services, and high-end data center work. And we kind of backed into becoming an MSP, more or less, because we did a good job with those things. And then our clients were like, hey, we have these servers and desktops. Can you help us with those? And I knew nothing about those things. So I had to go find people, and that's how we became an MSP, right? And so candidly, I never enjoyed it. It was a foreign entity to me. We struggled with it. Fortunately, I had some good people to support it. But in 2015, 2016, we were always security focused. So in 2016, I believe it was, when I really saw how the world was pivoting to where our sweet spot was, it didn't make sense to try to maintain the MSP stuff anymore. So we refocused the business, went back to only working on managed security and complex WAN and data center, the stuff that was in my wheelhouse, if you will. And we just grew from there. By that time, I'd also been in peer groups around the industry and recognized that all of my business was coming from MSPs in my peer group who didn't know how to work on Cisco or Juniper or Aruba or any of the other complex stuff. And we were taking all these calls, and it just made for a natural transition to a siloed expert around those entities. So,
which brings us where we are today. So you are a managed security provider, or I guess I should ask you how you describe what you do. That's what you are in my mind.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know the context of the audience, so I'll refrain from profanity, but the acronyms in our industry are painful, right? We can three-letter everything. And I don't know technically what our definition would be. I guess we're a master managed security service provider. So add, a fifth letter to the acronym. But really what we are is security-minded solution professionals. Everything we do is action-oriented. We do have one service that facilitates visibility, but in general, you've got a bunch of prior service, military, DOD, and just security professionals who when we come into work every day, our number one core value is defend the client, right? It's just clear, it's simple, we're on point. And so defining, I don't spend a lot of time on that so much as making sure that we define how we defend our partners and clients. So
I love it. Less about labels and more about what your role is, what your
right, actions, not words. I mean, you know, it is what it is. So
I love it. And your approach is a little bit unique because a lot of the vendors that I'm looking at in the space are kind of, they're selling point solutions, right? They're selling, you know, a widget here and a tool there and another tool here. And your approach is a little bit different. So can you help us understand that? And maybe this is a good question for Emily, either one of you, whichever one wants to take that question.
Emily, I would love to hear how you describe what we do.
All right, so how we describe what we do, and I'll actually take something from our director of operations to kind of define this. So many solution providers give you a tool or they give you a sword, and then we give you the samurai to go with it. So there's a lot of enterprise tools. There's a lot of pieces of software that you can use to do what we do. But most MSPs don't have the time, the capacity, or the people to really make sure all of those are working well. So they either end up with this huge stack of things that they don't know how to use, or a huge stack of half implemented tools. Whereas we come in on the back end and we take those enterprise tools and deploy them for you. So we take all of those expertise, we take all of the little pieces and parts that are really challenging for you to figure out and that you frankly don't have the time to deal with, and we deal with it all. So we take care of making sure you've got the enterprise solution so you can focus on your MSP side.
I love it. It's so interesting because you hear all the time, you know, tools, process technology, or people process technology. And then there's also this truism that the first time you deploy a product is the hardest, right? And then the second time it's a little bit easier. And then the third time you go, oh, maybe I should have a standard operating procedure for this. And so then the third time takes you a really long time because you're documenting as you go. And so there is great value in leaning on the team at BLOKWORX, who has done this not just 3 or 4 times, but probably 3 or 4 times this morning, maybe 3 or 4 times the first hour of the morning. And so you know the challenges and the pitfalls and what maybe plays nicely together and what kind of things to watch out for. So I love it. Love that very, very much. So obviously, the people that are listening to this are primarily MSPs. Some are newer on their security journey. Others are a little more mature and are just looking to round out their stack. And others already have a very, very robust stack. And so they're just curious about what it is that you do. So when MSPs come to you and start to engage, ask for a demo, have a deeper conversation, where are they in the cybersecurity journey? Are they just starting out? Are they looking to replace a product that they're unhappy with, or is it a mix?
No, it's a great question. Gosh, I can answer that so many different ways. So when MSPs get to us, typically they've been burned, they've partnered somewhere where they were drawn in by the shiny objects, right? The promises of all this greatness, and then they find out after being locked into a 36-month commitment that, oh, whoa, this isn't what they said it was. So we're seeing that more and more right now. So that's one way, and we're actually seeing adoption of just the acknowledgement of like, hey, we don't want to pay double, but we need this covered, right? So that authenticity in protection, that's one. Another one is maybe they weren't prepared right away. They had a event, starting to see that more and more, though, you know, historically, I will acknowledge this business has been built really cleaning up gaps for partners, right? And it's not that MSPs don't want to do what's right. It's just that you don't know what you don't know. Much like when I went into the MSP space, I mean, oh my God, trying to work down at that level for someone who all I'd ever done was complex wide area networks was painful for me, right? So so I can appreciate that. So, you know, cleanup is another aspect. What's most interesting, and you kind of hit on it, Jennifer, is like there's all these solutions, right? Anybody who goes to RSA, it's overwhelming. You walk on that floor and there's thousands and thousands of solutions. I mean, I joke that you can find a solution like, well, what does this do? Well, it protects the head of a pin on the 4th moon of the summer equinox of the 5th sunrise of inequity or whatever it is, right? And well, why do I need that? You know, how does that even fit into what I'm doing? So when you start to consider defense in depth and the thousands and thousands and thousands of tools that are literally out there for everything that's constantly evolving at a bazillion miles an hour, you know, what we do is we bring a elegant, holistic, complete defense in depth solution that helps our partners know, like, hey, I don't have to go figure all this stuff out. I've got cloud, edge, and endpoint in a holistic fashion, communicating to each other, all orchestrated, drawing visibility on indicators of compromise or malicious activity. And we really support them in following what is a mature IT delivery model, where you have silos, right? You have a help desk, you've got a project team, you've got a NOC, and you've got a SOC. And it's important to have those responsibilities and disciplines siloed or segmented, because, you know, this is something I've talked about for a long time. If you put a help desk person and task that individual with both security and helping the end user, you put that individual in a no-win situation, right? Help desk is there to be helpful. They're there to get the user back to work, solve the pain, whatever. Security, not so much. Security is going to be a little more stringent. Like, why do you need this open? What is this going to do? They're going to think more from a secure discipline of like, okay, I need to defend this environment. So to have an individual tasked with both of those, and we know which way it's going to go when they're on the phone with a business owner who's like, hey, I need this now. That user's tasked with opposing outcomes, and security will lose. Not because the person doesn't care, but when you're on the phone with a user and the user's pressing, you know,
the pressure is real. To get them up or help them do what they say they need to do, and it's always business critical. It's so interesting. One of the trends that's hot right now in the space is co-managed IT, and part of the talking point or the discussion around co-managed IT is that when you're going into a larger company, the IT director is usually either really good at strategy or they're really good at maintenance, and execution, but they're not usually good at both. And what I just heard you say is a different flavor of that. You may be great at MSP, but you have to be aware but you're not a security expert, and yet you have to provide that to your clients. It's that is 100% accurate. So what do? Well, you lean on a company like BLOKWORX to be, to play that heavy, to play that expert for you. And then you become that subject matter expert for them. And I would imagine an extension of their team. So.
Oh, 100%. And, this is a good point, actually, is my entire existence in technology has been in managed services, right? When I was in that former capacity, we were a SOC and a NOC supporting in-house IT for basically big corporations. I mean, my clients were SFO, Cisco, Microsoft, CNET, Applied Materials. I mean, all these huge entities, Clorox. And at the same time, we had little mom and pop regional 5-store organic food markets, right? And so that experience was invaluable. But what it really taught me was the fundamentals are all the same. Back to the previous point of these thousands of solutions and how do you put those together? That challenge is consistent across the spectrum, from the small shop all the way up to the bigger shops. So
we've talked a little bit about the ideal client coming to you, the ideal MSP. Are there MSPs that are not a good fit for what BLOKWORX is doing?
That's a great question. So, great fit. Let's address that first. Clients who acknowledge that they're not the security expert, right? That, hey, I'm going to stay in my swim lane. I know what I'm good at. I'm going to nail this 10 times out of 10, but I'm not going to get outside of that because that's why I'm coming for help. That's a great partner. Who's not a great partner? Someone who, or an entity that maybe isn't clear on their core values is probably one, because I see the trickle down effect of that. The other half is if you believe you're a security expert and you have all the tools to do this stuff, then you probably don't need us also. I've had some experiences working with MSPs that I've learned a lot from. You know, when an MSP comes to me and they're like, yeah, I just need the tool. Sell me the tool, I'll manage it myself. And then, 3 months later, they're complaining because burnout is real. You cannot watch thousands and thousands of events go by manually, right? And so our solutions, just to put some context around that, are backed up by a SIM and a SOAR, right? So SIM, what does a SIM do? A SIM is a visibility tool, right? It sorts things by severity, informational, low, medium, high, and critical. But a SIM does not inherently block anything. It's solely visibility and logging and archiving, if you will. What a SOAR actually does is security orchestration, automated remediation. It takes all the same data and ingests it and then correlates it, identifying risk that is even more dynamic than what a manual threat analyst can do pulling from a SIM, because it's now you're leveraging intelligence in that tool, so that the stuff that gets to the analyst is actually actionable versus informational, right? So MSPs who are trying to manage these tools, it's like watching the Matrix, just the number waterfall, right? The ones and zeros are flowing down, and after a while you start to daydream about being on a beach somewhere, which is much more enjoyable than staring at a screen. And then like, wait, what did I miss? Like, here's a good analogy. We've all been to a conference in the IT space, and everyone in the audience is in their laptop, and then the speaker says a word that catches their attention, like, wait, what did I miss? Right? But it's gone. You can't go back. So.
It's so funny. My mom is now a retired cardiac care nurse. And so she said the same thing would happen, right? Their job all night long is to stare at the line that the heart is making. And the same thing, you only get like 5 seconds at a time or 10 seconds at a time on the monitor, and then it's gone. And same thing. And she worked the night shift, right? So she's like, all of a sudden she'd be like, oh, I might have just missed something. My eyes went blurry. I didn't fall asleep. I'm still awake, but what did I miss? And in her career, they were able to say, well, if it was important, it'll happen again, right? Because if there's really something going wrong, there's another symptom coming, right down the pike. But in your world, you really can't afford to miss that one little blip that is an indication of not a heart attack, but a cyber attack. So I love it. So, okay, so if we're going to translate this to a non-technical person, which probably there's not a whole lot of us watching, if I think of NIST, the NIST framework, then a SIM is doing the detection and the SOAR is doing the response. Maybe it's a little more complex than that, but is that
that's
fair?
What a SIM is doing is providing a window into the activity in the environment. Right now, here's another important note on SIM. The quality of data that the SIM is able to pull is directly proportional to the quality of the device providing it. So if you put,
you mean garbage in, garbage out?
Yeah, I mean, you can have the world's greatest SIM that has the best Gartner reviews, blah, 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 whatever. But if you're trying to pull from a residential grade device or an appliance off the shelf at Best Buy, you're not going to get that visibility, right? So a SIM is really an informational visibility tool, whereas a SOAR, just like it sounds, it introduces automated remediation. Now, what we really have in today's world, with the evolution of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and ultimately deep learning, which is what one of our partners really brought to the table, is you've got intelligence at each layer, and then the SOAR still collecting all of that data from those individual pieces, creating yet an additional layer of actionability within the technology before the human has to validate, right? So to put some context on that, complete visibility, reduce the attack surface, stop known threats, prevent unknown threats, and automation with human validation. Unfortunately, I can't say those without saying all five together because it's just ingrained in my psyche now, but that automation with human validation is really the differentiator of a lot of these services. And it's also the biggest component that's going to differentiate cost to the MSP, because let's be honest, MSPs don't want to take the call at 3 in the morning. They would much prefer to have someone just handle it versus, okay, I've got this threat insight. What do I do now? Can you take care of it for me? Well, you didn't buy that level of service. You bought visibility, right? So anyways.
Yeah, so not only at 3 o'clock in the morning, but what if it's at noon, but the MSP doesn't know what they should do? Like, is this a threat? Is this not? I mean, it kind of looks like a threat, but if it is a threat, now what do I do? How do I clean it up? What damage did it do? I mean, this is a very tangled web. So
yeah, 100%.
So Jake is asking this question. He's watching the live right now. Can I ask what SIM and what SOAR product you are using? And then what cloud is the product located in? And in a 3-part question. And are you able to offer a US only service for federal aligned customers? So do you want me to give those back to you one at a time?
Do we know Jake? I'm just kidding. So totally happy to answer those. So SIM is SIM. We don't really talk about that, but we are public with our SOAR. Our SOAR is WITFU, W-I-T, Foxtrot, Oscar, Oscar. WITFU is developed by all DoD, prior military, prior Department of Defense. It is an incredible tool, and we have a really strong relationship with the folks over there. We've actually helped roadmap that product with them. It's an interesting conversation because we have that relationship with a lot of our vendors. BLOKWORX built and really drove the multi-tenancy for Deep Instinct and bringing Deep Instinct to the channel. We are doing the same with WITFU, and then we're also doing the same with another cloud product, which will all be feeding and driven by the intelligence of WITFU. But probably the most important aspect of the question that you just asked is we're all 100% US based, right? BLOKWORX is privately owned, and we will not be offshoring anytime in the foreseeable future, as long as I have a heartbeat. And so we are fully compliant with really the need to defend our country's data, right? Our supply chain. So I understand some of the underlying drivers of that question, and yes, we are 100% US.
Love it. Okay, good. I think that's the answer he was hoping you would give. So I'm reading between the lines, but
we're hearing it a lot, right? Because with acquisition comes offshoring. Because, well, let me back up. This is why I believe so strongly that a security policy is really driven by your core values, right? So core values are going to dictate business decisions, and ours are very clear: defend the client, right? That's number one. We understand what that means. We live it. It is what it is. But when a company is acquired, maybe the motivation is bottom line, and I can, as that entity, push my support costs down by engaging offshore. There's some really, really great companies that have done that, and then all the traditional issues of offshoring start to show up, right? So I feel the pain, I understand it, and I just want to be clear for us, that's not on the table. So
awesome. Okay, so let's shift a little bit, because you've touched on a couple of the tools that you've used. One term that has not come up in the last 30 minutes or so is XDR. So we've kind of watched this evolution from, you know, endpoint detection and response, EDR to MDR, and now we're seeing XDR popping up with a couple of different definitions depending who you ask. So let me ask you how you define XDR. Why do you think it's important, or even do you think it's important?
XDR, right? So I throw XDR in the marketing bucket. And here's why I say that. No offense to my marketing peeps. I love you all. We need you, especially technical people like myself, who we just go deep dive into the bits and bytes. But XDR is really more marketing speak, right? It grew from EDR. And if we back up and take a bigger, more global view, you know, we went through a cycle years ago of VoIP. Everything was VoIP. VoIP was hot, VoIP, 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 VoIP. And then it was cloud, right? So now cloud. And now we're EDR and then XDR. And so what XDR is really saying, depending on who you talk to, some will say the X is agnostic and it just means pulling from any resource, right? Whether it's cloud, edge, endpoint, network, so forth. Or I've seen other definitions of it's extended, which just means the same thing beyond the endpoint. You know, for BLOKWORX, it's always been holistic. How do we get the most visibility from the most disparate sources to reduce our client and partners' risk, to avoid having the conversation none of us want to have, right? So does that help clarify?
Yeah, I think it does. It's interesting because there are a lot. We were saying at the beginning, there's a lot of letters and acronyms, and sometimes they are legitimate and sometimes they are more marketing fluff. So I'm just gonna leave that there. I'm not gonna go dive down that rabbit hole too far. But okay.
Well, I do want to throw something out there. I spoke at an event a couple weeks ago, and I happened to hear a portion of another speaker there. And BLOKWORX is prevention focused. Now, let me put some context on that. What do I mean when I say we're prevention focused? Well, in our world, the best event is the one that never happens. So our commitment to prevention is like without question. However, all of the same workflow and threat analysis and processing for the detection and response is present, right? So we are doing those things. We just emphasize not wanting to let something in before we take action on it, right? And this individual was basically just forfeiting that, you know, they're going to get in, Now, I'm not going to say I disagree with it, but I don't ever want to lead with that. I'm not going to lead from a defeated position of, oh, they're already inside, let's detect and respond. No, let's harden our perimeter. Let's follow those 5 things, right? That complete visibility, reduce the attack surface, don't do silly stuff, don't open RDP and just have it open because it was easy to facilitate. So complete visibility, reduce the attack surface, stop known threats, prevent unknown threats, that's your 0 days, and then the automation with human validation. So I firmly believe in prevention. And candidly, we're not immune to terminating relationships with vendors who don't keep their promises, right? And I bring that up because we had a vendor recently that we had to pivot from because they didn't stand behind their product. And our commitment to that security, that prevention, is really where our loyalty lies, not with vendors. So
And it's interesting, that may help to explain why you are working with vendors that aren't necessarily in the mainstream. Like a lot of the vendors you work with are not super well known until they start to work with you, and then you get the word out. That's a pretty unusual position to take. So how are you selecting those vendors, and I guess vetting those vendors?
Yeah, great question. So we've been blessed really to be right place at the right time. In 2016, I was approached by I guess you'd say an endpoint protection entity at that time, and they wanted to leverage our perimeter defense. It ended up not working out, but what it did do is open my eyes that, okay, we need to account for the endpoint. And the universe then delivered me a relationship with Deep Instinct. I met Deep Instinct literally right after they came out of stealth mode. I saw the brilliance and the differentiator in it, and I thought, wow, that was the first time I'd been excited about technology, probably since I was first introduced to Palo, which at that point was like 6-7 years previous. So right place, right time. And then with our current cloud solution now, we were putting basically SIM on 365, and we were getting these events, and we were able to notify partners, but it didn't fulfill our cadence of actionability. And then we stumbled into this vendor, and the synergy in working with them was amazing, and it helped us fill this cloud gap. And suddenly we had just this ridiculous 0-day protection in the cloud, at the edge, at the endpoint, so that our visibility tools, I don't want to bring any karma on us, but when you put things together the right way, you don't burn out your analysts, right? Because they're able to research things in a predictable cadence, leveraging the technology. So for us, that commitment to security versus vendor, don't get me wrong, we're a good partner to both our upstream and clients, but it has to deliver, and the security's priority. So
Love it. It's so interesting because what I'm hearing is what a lot of MSPs do with their own ticketing board, right? Like they look and say, how was that ticket created? How can we keep that ticket from being created again? How can we, streamline this so that when we do have to troubleshoot it, it's faster, easier. And that's what you're doing, except on the security side. So I love it to make, obviously you can't get rid of the alerts, but you can help your team not get alert fatigue by the systems and processes you put in place, which then of course gives better protection and faster protection to the MSPs and the MSPs clients. So I love it.
Yeah, like listening to you describe it back, like one of the ways that we effectively implement prevention is script control, right? When we onboard our endpoint solution into our client environments, we commit about 22 hours on average per client to auditing every script that's present and creating a very let's just say tight script control process. And that is very manual intensive. However, the amount of noise it quiets down, the amount of risk reduction that the environment experiences, this is an area where a lot of MSPs will inherit residue from clients, and they don't know all the scripts that are running. And script control is not a medial task, right? It takes tools and expertise to facilitate that. But when it's in place and you think about the risk that like fileless malware presents, executing in RAM and then going out to GitHub and pulling something down, the value there is huge. So
that's an awesome value add. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Emily's marketing mind is spinning right now, trying to figure out how she can talk about that more. I think that's great.
Emily has been pure gold since she got here. Like Emily helped take the other half of my brain and get it into easily digestible terms, because you know, Mike Tarango is my director of operations. He finishes my sentences even when I'm all over the board. And that's why our technology is so tight and everything's on point the way it is. And, you know, I know we're live, and Emily, I don't want to embarrass you or anything, but having you here and being able to like take our jibber jabber tech, whatever, and put it into human has been awesome. So,
well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here doing that. That's what I love to do.
Love it. Very, very cool. All right, so let's wrap up with this. If someone wants to reach out to you, I've seen a couple of pretty technical questions coming in, and I just said, hey, that might be a better question for a deeper chat or a demo, or what is a good next step? How do they reach out to the team? Where do they go from here? So much good stuff we talked about today.
Perfect. There's a couple options where they can go, and I'll drop these into the comments too. But the first one is blockworks.com/apply. That's the fastest way to get on the phone with some of our technical experts to go over all the solutions, to answer all their tech questions, all that kind of fun stuff. So blockworks.com/apply, which I will see if I can double task here and type at the same time. And then we also have a webinar tomorrow, and that webinar is to introduce a new product or a new product suite that we have coming out right now as well. So if they want a little bit more information, want to hear us yammer a little bit more, that's another spot they can go, and I'll drop the link to that as well down there. But the best place to get in the conversation with us is that apply link that is now in the comments.
Awesome. So Jake, take a look at the comments, because that is in there now, and you can ask all of your questions about Azure and Sentinel and all the questions that I don't even understand. I'm sure that people on his team will. So I understand the concept of what you're asking. I certainly can't answer them. So I don't guess at things like that. So awesome.
Jennifer, is there like a Kubernetes question in there somewhere? Or?
Nope, none of those. Sorry. All right, so let me go back and make sure I did not miss any. Nope, the comments I missed are Emily's. So that's perfect. So good stuff. All right, well, thank you both so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Appreciate you sponsoring the Facebook group. I know you are going to be tremendous resources to people as they are continuing to harden their stack and become better security experts, at least enough so that they figure out there's a lot more to it than most of us realize. And that's why we have people like you on our teams. So I appreciate it. We will definitely stay in touch and bring you back in a couple of months to see what's new in the world. And until then, just reach out if you need us. And for those of you watching the live, thanks for joining us live. And for those of you watching the replay, thank you for watching that as well. Drop comments in here. We can either tag Emily as they come in or connect you with the team. And I'm going to conclude us for today. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer. You rock.
Thank you. You too.